As much as I like good, useful software like Neri, the Wayland compositor I'm running, or QPWGraph for patching together pipewire sources and sinks, which is how I take the audio from my capture card and send it out to my speakers, the software that I really love is software that is basically useless. Software where someone said, I'm gonna make this thing, not because I have a use case for it, but haha, wouldn't it be funny if this was possible? Here is a good example of that. This might look like a terminal. In fact, it might even look exactly like my regular terminal, Alacrity. But that's not what this is. It operates like a terminal. You can run your commands in here. You can do everything you want to do in here. But that's not exactly what it is. Here might be a better demo. Here is a video playing in Firefox. But this Firefox window looks a little bit strange. It looks a little bit blurry. The window's a little bit small. But what's happening here? Also, if I do this, it crashes. This is clearly not Firefox in its regular natural habitat. And that Alacrity before, that terminal we saw before, that wasn't exactly a normal terminal. Well, what you've been witnessing is a little application called Term Everything. Now, it might be better to call it Term Some Things, and some things that do work immediately crash, and most other things don't work, but the goal is to term everything. So let's run Alacrity again, but this time not changing anything. So it is rendering everything to the terminal with the characters available in the terminal. The more I zoom out, the higher quality it's gonna get. And at a high enough point, it starts to look pretty good. Now, I can hear my fans turning up because this is a very computationally expensive process. There is a lot of characters on the screen that are being redrawn very frequently. And you might be able to tell that something is off with the cursor being just a tiny little bit laggy. Just teensy bit. But okay, terminal's too small for that. It technically does work. Let's try that again with an application that probably is gonna fit. HTOP. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. HTOP running inside of a terminal, running inside of a terminal. This is a terminal-based Wayland compositor. Yes, you heard me correctly. A terminal-based Wayland compositor. Do you need to be able to do this? No. Do you want to be able to do this? Probably also no. Is it technically possible to do so? Oh, 100%. And does that mean it's really, really cool? I think so, at least. Now, here we have the GitHub page, and I want to show you a quick demo from it, because I can't really get it to work on my system. It theoretically should work, but for some reason, it's just not working on my system. So if you're running this on macOS with iTerm, or theoretically Kitty on Linux, you can use the image generations of those terminal, the image generation systems in those terminal, to generate a full resolution version of the application and use it like you would for, you know, any regular GUI application, albeit really, really, really slow. I have not been able to get this to work. So let's go and open up Kitty. If we go into my downloads, because I've not bothered to properly install the application, we run term everything. Jesus Christ. Firefox. For some reason, it's still using the regular Unicode generation. I don't know why. Maybe it doesn't work properly in Kitty. Clearly, it works in iTerm, right? So if you're on macOS and you want to run it through that, then you can do that. Maybe there is something I'm missing I need to go and do, but there's no documentation for the application right now. So I'm not sure if there is what I would be missing. Now, for all the terminals that I've tried on Linux, typing a character will cause it to immediately crash Firefox. However, if you're on macOS, or if for some reason it doesn't crash on your system, theoretically, you can play Doom through this. Either through loading an application that you can just run Doom like DOSBox, or on the web. Now, is this going to be the worst possible way to play Doom? Surprisingly not, actually. Surprisingly, there are much worse ways to play Doom. It's not my preferred method, but it's certainly functional. Again, that is assuming that Firefox or whatever browser you're using doesn't immediately crash upon any keyboard input, which you're gonna kind of need keyboard input to play Doom. So that's a problem, but, you know, it is what it is. Now, whilst I am running this on a Wayland compositor, you don't need to be on Wayland to run this. The Wayland compositor is gonna run inside the terminal, so as long as you have a terminal, which you probably do. Now, I've not run it in every terminal. Is it gonna play nicely in something like Xterm? Probably not. But if you're using any sensible true color terminal, any reasonably modern terminal that you should be running, you're gonna have an experience. Maybe not a good one, but an experience. One thing I have noticed is, at least on my system, X11 applications don't seem to be able to work right now. So if we open something like Xeyes, for example, it's gonna get to here and then never leave this screen. Let's run another one like, say, ST. It's entirely possible these specific applications do not work, and every other application that I've tried also does not work. But it's also possible, again, there's no documentation for anything right now, so I'm kind of guessing for a lot of stuff that right now it doesn't have working X-Wayland, or if it does have working X-Wayland, maybe the X11 server on my system, which in my case is my X-Wayland server, if you're on Xorg would be your Xorg server, is interfering with it working. Possibly that could be the case, but I'm not entirely sure. Again, no documentation. Application is very experimental right now, so not fully sure. But just keep that in mind if for some reason you have an actual use case for the application and you need to use an X11 application. One thing the dev could absolutely fix and should fix is if we go to the download link here, when you download the file, I don't know why it's like this, it's got all of the documentation in the name of the application, telling you to chmod the file. How about you just put a line in the documentation saying chmod the file to make sure you can run it, and then give it a normal short name? If you've noticed in any of the commands that are being shown off here, it's using a really long command name. So I'm assuming this is I'm assuming this is how they run it on their system. Just don't, there's no need to tell people to run the command with this super long name. Just tell them to run the command and give it a normal name. Now, is there a use for the application? Honestly, it's really hard to say, right? Because every single use I can think of, whether it's SSHing into a system and running a GUI application, whether it's whether it's like accessing some GUI application from inside a container or inside a virtual machine, like every single use I can think of, remote desktop is a better idea. Now, I am not against the idea that there could be a real, functional, good use case for this tool. And I'm not saying the tool shouldn't exist. I love that this exists. I just don't know when or where you would ever use it. Now, let's jump over to the How I Did It page. A long, long time ago, when a program wanted to draw something to the screen, it could write to a certain spot in RAM. The screen was a Wild West and anyone could draw anywhere, anytime. This is how it worked back during the DOS and earlier days. This is how games like Doom worked and things like that. It was a quick and functional way to write an application. It was not super portable, but it worked. It certainly worked. It's just also not very secure, and you don't exactly want random applications to be redrawing the entire screen. Nowadays, display access is coordinated by a special program called the display server, which coordinates the input and output of its clients and from the rest of the operating system, the hardware, and each other, with input being mouse, keyboard, etc., and output being graphics, images, anything you see in a window. This is a much better place to be in. You still have problems, obviously. You have applications that will take over your entire screen and do really bad things. You know, you talk about things like ransomware and all this good stuff, but there is like some attempt to ensure that it's at least a little bit harder to do so. On modern Linux for display servers, most use either the Wayland protocol or X11. We're going to focus on Wayland mostly because it's newer and there are systems in place to run older X11 applications in Wayland for backwards compatibility. I'm not sure if it's just more buggy on Linux. It's very possible the application works fine enough on macOS, and the Linux build is just incredibly broken. Now, Wayland does not have a set rendering model. The programs decide entirely on their own how they will draw their windows or other graphics, and they're just handed over to the display server. The Wayland protocol actually has no opinion on what to do with the graphics the programs give you. Sure, they probably expect you to use kernel mode setting, but really, if you wanted to, you could print out the graphics and give a league of crochet grandmas to individually tie together every single pixel into the Afghan of legend. The programs would never be the wiser. Because of this model where the applications just say, draw the thing, you can do stupid things, like if you wanted to make, say, I don't know, a printer, your display device. You could do it. Should you do it? No. Better yet, you could make a thermal printer for printing receipts to your display. Again, don't do it. This is not a recommendation, but if someone does make this application, if someone does make this compositor, tell me about it and I will make a video on it. Again, the main benefit of Wayland is the programs don't care how they get input as long as it gets input, and it doesn't care what happens to its output. So this means we can do anything we want, so let's output to the terminal. I take the output given to us by the client and convert the images to terminal output, the UTF-8 characters with ANSI escape codes by the Chaffer library. For input, I take the keyboard and mouse. Yes, terminals support mice from standard in. I will occasionally use my mouse in something like NeoVim, and that's it. Of course, there are about 10,000 lines of code needed to actually do this in practice, but if you're interested, you can go and check out the source code and see how it functions if you are a psycho and you're interested in having a look into that one. Also, yes, you are not seeing that wrong. Those do say .ts. There is quite a bit of TypeScript in this project. So, if you like TypeScript, it's a mix of TypeScript and C++. Now, does that produce the most optimal code? Probably not. However, it does function. And that's all that matters. Now, this whole idea of not caring about what the output device is, this is a big part of the reason why it's so much easier to build a VR Wayland compositor. Now, it's still a fairly small niche area, and it's like a niche of a niche. But even so, there are projects that are in the works, like Stardust XR and various other things in that space, where the idea of a VR desktop on Linux is actually becoming viable. Now, are you going to use it? You know, that depends on you. But somebody's making it, and it is going to be usable. Now, the part that really scares me is what it says at the end. What else can you do with Wayland? I have many other crazy ideas of what else to do custom Wayland display server. I don't want to know. Actually, I kind of do. That would make a great video. What you are going to do with Wayland. Now, a printer is a pretty sensible device. Maybe you could output in... maybe binary converted into Morse code. Ooh, I like that. Probably wouldn't be that difficult either. Now, if you'd like to try out the application, just come over to the GitHub page, either go to releases right here or scroll down to where it says download the beta test. This will take you over to the releases page, and it is available as an app image, so just make sure you go and chmod it, and then you will be good to go. Now, if you can find a reason to use the application, not just, oh, it can do this thing, but something it can actually do that justifies actually keeping it around, I really would love to know, because right now I can come up with like neat things to do with it, but there are better ways to do all of them. But I'd like to know your thoughts. So go like the video, go subscribe if you really like the video, and if you really, really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon subscribe daily bearer pay linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and just why?